Chile saw a third day of protests in support of the proposal for a third 10% withdrawal from private pension funds and to demand the resignation of President Sebastián Piñera. Cuban health authorities are getting ready to launch a mass vaccination campaign against the novel coronavirus in the capital this May. The Russian defense minister ordered an end to military drills at the Opuk training ground in the Crimea. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is from the south, and I'm Katrina Goss. Chile saw a third day of protests on Thursday in support of the proposal for a third 10% withdrawal from private pension funds and to demand the resignation of President Sebastián Piñera. Several protests erupted across the country as President Piñera tries to block the initiative in the Constitutional Court after it was approved in the Senate by a large majority. Mass protests have been called for the next few days, as well as calls for strike action by several unions in the country. Chileans have been able to make early withdrawals from their pension funds on 2 previous occasions as they face a severe economic crisis aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. This Friday, Bolivia holds the last day of conferences as part of the forum titled The Re-Encounter with the Pachamama, which seeks to promote legislation to tackle ecocide and deepen the protection of Mother Earth. The event sees the participation of academics, activists and intellectuals from both the region and the rest of the world. A high-level panel also features with the participation of heads of state and government, including the presidents of Nicaragua, Venezuela and Bolivia, as well as the Prime Minister of Dominica and Cuba's Foreign Minister. The forum comes in the framework of International Mother Earth Day, a UN-recognised event that was established following a resolution presented by Bolivia 12 years ago. In Colombia, at least 30 people were injured when armed groups attacked an indigenous collective protest movement known as a Minga in the department of Cauca. The Regional Indigenous Council of Cauca announced that the attack took place after local communities began a caravan calling for territorial control towards sites where illicit crops are grown, which they're seeking to remove from their ancestral territories. Participants were met with bursts of gunfire by illegal armed groups. Communities expressed their indignation due to the continued violation of human rights, while denouncing a lack of protection from the state.
Con este contrato estamos garantizando 5.200.000 dosis para
3 members of the Catholic clergy out of a group of 7 who were kidnapped in Haiti on April 11th have been released, officials announced. The Conference of Haiti, which has been promoting a work stoppage in Catholic institutions, including schools and universities, since Wednesday to protest against the escalating insecurity, confirmed the release of the clergy kidnapped by an armed gang. A spokesperson for the Bishops' Conference confirmed to the press that 2 French nationals, a priest and a nun, were among the kidnapped and are still in the hands of the perpetrators. Kidnappings for ransom have surged in the country in recent months, rocked by gang violence, police repression and political unrest. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, hundreds of volunteers are supporting the logistics in evacuation shelters, including teachers who are providing recreation programs for children.
I'm a volunteer here at the shelter, also a teacher. I work here at the Fairhall Government School, which has now been transformed into a shelter. Shelter life here has been going good on a day-to-day basis. Basically, we get here at different times of the day. There are different volunteers throughout the day. We come, we volunteer with food, water, we help to keep the kids comfortable, we help with snacks, and we ensure that basically everything is running. It's been like working at the shelter on a day-to-day basis.
Well, it's really it's something that I've never experienced before, so it's a bit difficult and challenging in terms of having to be away from your family each day, but it's rewarding interacting with the people, the children, especially because I love the children, and having fun with them because I just started a program with the children from 9:30 to 12, so coming every day to interact with them, it's rewarding for me.
It's not as comfortable as home, but it's okay for me.
Okay, and what was it like when the volcano started to erupt?
Well, we left before.
Oh, you left before?
Yes, we came here at 2 o'clock in the night.
St. Lucia is again serving as a humanitarian disaster assistance to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The help this time is coming from Venezuela and Cuba in the wake of the latest volcanic eruption. St. Lucia, St. Vincent's closest neighbour to the north, has acted as an aid bridge ever since the April 9th eruption at LUCIA volcano forced the evacuation of tens of thousands and rained ash to the north on St. Lucia and as far west as Barbados. The embassies of and Venezuela in the country arranged a transfer of Cuba's airlifted supplies for onward passage to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Cuba also sent 6 medical personnel to support the efforts. This week, a Venezuelan Navy supply ship left St. Lucian waters carrying relief goods. The country also served as a humanitarian bridge for Cuban and Venezuelan assistance to neighbouring Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts and Nevis, destruction by Hurricane Maria and Irma in 2017. More protests are planned this weekend in the United States in the wake of the deadly shooting of a black 16-year-old girl by police in Columbus, Ohio. Another fatal police encounter angering a city where allegations of police brutality and police shootings of black children and men have bred public mistrust. After the Biden administration announced this week it will open a civil rights investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department following the conviction of former police officer Derek Chauvin on all counts in the death of George Floyd. Some in Ohio's capital city are pleading for similar attention following the death of Ma'Khia Bryant, a black teenager who was shot by police on Tuesday afternoon, just minutes before the Chauvin verdict was announced. The Department of Justice has previously investigated Columbus police over use of false allegations. Protesters denounce what they say is a decade of patterns and practices of ineptitude and racism and are calling for a fresh investigation. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Cuban health authorities are getting ready to launch a mass vaccination campaign against the novel coronavirus in Havana in May, according to the Ministry of Public Health. Authorities stated that vaccine candidates Sawarana O2 and Abdallah will be applied in all Havana districts, not already part of the Phase 3 clinical trials, in an intervention study that will cover around 1.7 million people. The vaccination will initially target people aged 60 and over, considered the highest risk group. Pregnant and postpartum women and infants, as well as those who have recovered from the disease, will be excluded from the study. And this Friday, Cuba reported a new daily record for COVID-19 cases at 1,241. Despite the restrictions that remain in place to fight the spread of the virus, the country continues to see a surge in cases. Havana and Matanzas once again recorded the highest number of infections. Despite the rising figures, Cuba's infection rate remains low compared to other nations in the region, and the recovery rate is over 94%. As the pandemic hit the Caribbean, the region received high-profile help from Cuba, India and Taiwan, while the US government has largely failed to play a leading role, as noted by Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Timothy Harris. The Prime Minister referred in a phone-telephone interview to the lack of aid from the world's most powerful country in the fight against the pandemic. The first vaccines to arrive in the Caribbean community were donated by India. Taiwan provided masks and face shields, while Cuba has sent its medical brigades to St. Kitts and other surrounding nations. The PM acknowledged that the US is helping by providing $2 billion to the COVAX facility to supply vaccines to poor nations, but he stressed that the Caribbean has not seen any high-profile gestures from Washington. Harris noted that it's in Washington's interest to aid its neighbours, as by making vaccines available in the region, the US could help revive economies, cut poverty and thereby curb migration. 16 provinces of Ecuador enter a curfew and other mobility restrictions this Friday to fight the spread of COVID-19. The measures will be in place for 28 days and were issued as part of the efforts to fight a rapid surge in COVID-19 infections and deaths. A nighttime curfew will be implemented from Monday to Friday, while weekends will see a 24-hour curfew, during which time individuals may only leave their homes for essential purposes, including the purchase of basic goods and responding to medical issues. In the remaining provinces of the country, other measures will be in effect, such as the prohibition of the sale and consumption of alcohol, the use of teleworking where possible, and the suspension of in-person classes. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday backed a proposal by the country's health agency to decree 10 non-working days in May to curb the coronavirus epidemic. The health agency said the outbreak was receding, but the pace of the reduction in COVID cases and deaths has not been as rapid in recent weeks. The strategy is to declare a non-working period that would encompass 2 national holidays, namely May 3rd and 8th, meaning that Russians would not be obliged to work from May 1st to 10th, thus reducing the numbers of people circulating and on public transport and the possible spread of the virus.
Say many times that both at the federal and regional levels, I will urge all colleagues to listen to the opinion of specialists, of virologists.
French authorities have announced that a curfew will be maintained until at least mid-May and that massive orders for self-test kits have been made for the start of the new school year. The French Prime Minister also announced that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will start being administered from Saturday.
The curfew, I remind you, is maintained and will be maintained until further notice, and we will see in midday the next stage, where the epidemic situation will be, that's clear. So there is no automaticity to the lifting of the curfew, including at this deadline. From the next week onwards, there will be more saliva tests for elementary schools. We were doing 250,000 a week at the end of March. We'll be doing 400,000 a week when we start again, with the prospect of reaching 600,000 tests by midday.
India posted a new record for COVID-19 cases and deaths in the past 24 hours, while fire in a hospital in Maharashtra state treating COVID-19 patients killed 14 people. India reported a new daily record for the 7th day with over 332,000 cases and more than 2,200 deaths amid an alarming shortage of medical oxygen and beds in its hospitals. In addition, the country recorded the world's highest ever daily tally of coronavirus cases for a second day in a row. Meanwhile, the death toll in a devastating hospital fire rose to 14 as authorities continue to evacuate COVID patients. According to an official, a spark from an air conditioner triggered the fire, which was aggravated by the heavy oxygen supply. The total number of cases registered has now surpassed 16 million, while the death toll stands at over 180,000, according to Health Ministry data. Japanese authorities declared a state of emergency for the prefectures of Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto and Hyogo on Friday as the country struggles to contain a resurgent coronavirus epidemic just 3 months ahead of the Olympic Games. The nation's virus outbreak remains smaller than in many countries. However, a recent uptick in cases has officials and medical professionals worried, even as the government and Olympic organisers insist that the Summer Games will go ahead. The Economy Minister stated that under a new state of emergency, which will run from April 25th to May 11th, the government will require restaurants, bars and karaoke parlours to close and big sporting events to be held without spectators. The measures seek to deal with what is already the 4th wave of contagions in the country since the beginning of the pandemic.
We felt it was necessary to slow down the spread of the virus by taking effective and concentrated measures during the short period of the Golden Week when many citizens take holidays. Our fears turn to the evolution of variants. The proportion they represent among those who test positive has risen to 80% in Osaka and Hyogo Prefecture, 70% in Kyoto and 30% in Tokyo. The greatest vigilance is required.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Friday, the Russian Defence Minister ordered an end to military drills at the OPEC training ground in the Crimea, as President Vladimir Putin expressed his willingness to receive his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, to discuss bilateral relations. Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu confirmed that troops had demonstrated their ability to provide defence for the country and the objectives of the exercise had been fulfilled. The Ukrainian president welcomed the decision as tensions at the border de-escalate following the massing of Ukrainian troops and military equipment in what appeared to be an attempt to retake the self-proclaimed independent republics of Luhansk and Donetsk. This Friday, China urged Japan to face up to the domestic and international outcries over its controversial decision to dump nuclear-contaminated water into the ocean.
We must honestly face up to these domestic and international doubts and objections, and cannot continue to play dumb. The Fukushima nuclear contamination and the disposal of contaminated water are by no means Japan's domestic matter. If the to-be-discharged water is not nuclear polluted, why doesn't Japan keep it within its borders? Japan should not turn its back on the global marine environment and the health and safety of the people all over the world. Japan should not pass on its own responsibilities to all mankind. If the Japanese side insists on putting its own selfish interests above the international public interests and taking the dangerous first step, then the Japanese people will not agree to it, and neither neighboring countries nor the international community will allow it. The Japanese government will also have to pay the price for its irresponsible behavior and leave a stain on history.
Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby confirmed that the United States is sending airborne assets to assist Indonesia in its search efforts to find a missing military submarine. In addition to the US, Australia, India and Singapore have also been involved in the search, deploying special equipment to help locate the submarine. On Wednesday, the Indonesian Navy lost communication with the vessel carrying over 50 people as it took part in military drills near Bali. The missing sub, which is thought to be running low on oxygen, is reported to be at a depth of some 2,300 feet, well out of the range of underwater rescue operations. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen arrived in Jakarta on Friday ahead of a special summit of the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations to discuss the crisis in Myanmar on Saturday. The head of Myanmar's military government, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, will attend the summit, his first known foreign trip since the seizure of power on February 1st. The summit seeks to address the situation following the military ousting of an elected government led by civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. According to a local activist group, security forces have killed around 700 and imprisoned thousands of largely peaceful protesters and bystanders since the takeover. Opponents of the military junta have condemned the fact that the bloc is welcoming its chief to the meeting, arguing that power was seized by force and the general is not Myanmar's legitimate leader. This Friday, Chad's capital in N'Djamena hosted the state funeral of President Idris Deby, who passed away on Tuesday after being wounded in combat against rebels in the north of the country. The ceremony was attended by numerous heads of state, including the presidents of France, Mali, Burkina Faso, the Central African Republic and Guinea. Countries in the region have called on the African Union to address possible violent scenarios following the insurgent acts by the Front for Change and Concord in north of the country. The UN Security Council expressed concern on Thursday about the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia's Tigray region, particularly the abuse of women and girls. Members of the Security Council expressed their deep concern about allegations of human rights violations and abuses, including reports of sexual violence against women and girls, and called for investigations to find those responsible and bring them to justice. The 15-member body also called for a scaled-up humanitarian response and unfettered humanitarian access to address the humanitarian needs in the embattled northern region of the country, where people are in need of food aid. Last week, in a closed-door session, the UN humanitarian official said the humanitarian situation in Tigray had deteriorated and warned that the vast majority of the region of some 6 million people is completely or partially inaccessible for humanitarian agencies. And the Red Cross also voiced alarm over horrific accounts of sexual violence in Ethiopia's conflict-hit Tigray region, amid fears that rape has been used as a weapon of war.
Something that is also a matter of grave concern is the reports of sexual violence happening. We are trying to gather the scope and the magnitude of this problem, but there are horrific reports that we hear firsthand from women reaching those very health centers and hospitals that we are supporting, where
Israeli occupation forces repress Palestinian worshippers at Damascus Gate in the Old City of Jerusalem, while Israeli settlers have launched violent attacks on Palestinian homes. At least 100 young Palestinians were injured after the use of water cannons and stun grenades by the Israeli occupation forces. Meanwhile, extremist Jewish settlers shouted hate messages against Palestinians, including "Arabs will burn," while also launching attacks. The Palestinian presidency has strongly condemned the increasing incitement by extremist Israeli groups advocating the killing of Palestinians in the occupied territory of Jerusalem. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many of our stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.